Most fans think Mohamed Salah made history when the ball reached the net. He did not. The history was already waiting in the tunnel, sitting on the bench, and trembling in the hands of an entire football nation. The goal simply gave 92 years of waiting somewhere to go. That is why Egypt coach Hossam Hassan cried after the final whistle. Not Salah, as some headlines have suggested. Hassan was the man overcome by tears. Salah was the man whose goal and assist helped release them. Egypt had just beaten New Zealand 3-1 in Vancouver. It was their first victory at a World Cup, ever. One match, 3 goals, several records broken. But the numbers alone do not explain the emotion. To understand that, you have to understand the weight Egypt carried into BC Place. Egypt first appeared at the World Cup in 1934. They were the first African team to play at the tournament, but their journey lasted one match. Hungary beat them 4-2 in Naples. Abdelrahman Fawzi scored both Egyptian goals, becoming an early African World Cup pioneer, yet Egypt went home without a victory. Then came silence. Egypt did not return for 56 years. When they finally qualified for Italy in 1990, they were disciplined and difficult to beat. They drew with the Netherlands. They drew with the Republic of Ireland. Then England defeated them 1-0. Respect earned. History postponed. Another 28 years passed before Egypt reached Russia in 2018. This time, they arrived with Salah as a global star and with the country expecting a breakthrough. Instead, they lost all 3 group matches. Salah scored twice, but Egypt left without a point and without the victory they had been chasing since 1934. That is the first framework for understanding this story. Appearance created hope. Hope created pressure. Pressure survived every generation. And every failed attempt made the next opportunity heavier. By the time Egypt met New Zealand in 2026, the wait had stretched across 92 years. Before that tournament, Egypt had played 7 World Cup matches without a victory. Their opening result in 2026 extended the winless sequence to 8. Every Egyptian team that had entered this competition had carried the same unfinished sentence. Then New Zealand scored first? Of course they did. Football has a wicked sense of timing. In the 15th minute, Tim Payne delivered a corner, and Finn Sermon rose to head the ball past Mostafa Shobair. New Zealand led 1-0. Egypt had arrived looking for liberation and instead found the oldest fear in their World Cup history. The first half became a test of memory as much as football. Every misplaced pass could be connected to 1934, 1990, or 2018. Every New Zealand clearance seemed to remove another minute from Egypt's chance to change the record. This is what historical pressure does. It turns the present into a courtroom for the past. New Zealand had a clear route. Stay compact, defend the box, use direct passes toward Chris Wood, make Egypt chase the game. The longer the lead survived, the more desperation would do New Zealand's defending for them. Egypt needed more than possession. They needed control without panic. At halftime, Hossam Hassan faced a dressing room that was 45 minutes away from another chapter of almost. Reports after the match described a forceful message from the coach. The tactical details mattered, but the psychological instruction mattered just as much. Egypt had to stop playing against 92 years and start playing against 11 men in white. That sounds simple. In a World Cup dressing room, it is not. The second half began with Egypt playing higher and moving the ball with greater urgency. Salah became more influential between the right side and central areas. New Zealand could no longer watch only the touchline. The spaces around their midfield and central defenders began to stretch. The equalizer arrived in the 58th minute. Mohamed Hani crossed from the right. Mustafa Ziko attacked the delivery and headed Egypt level. 1 goal changed the atmosphere. It also changed the geometry. At 1 goal each, New Zealand could no longer protect the lead. Egypt no longer had to force every attack. The match opened, and an open match is where Salah becomes less like a winger and more like a problem with boots. 9 minutes later, the decisive move arrived. Egypt attacked quickly. Salah released the ball and continued his run. Zico returned it with a clever back heel. Salah entered the penalty area, shaped his body, and guided a low left-footed finish into the far corner. New Zealand won, Egypt 2. The finish lasted a second. The journey behind it lasted generations. That goal placed Salah alone at the top of Egypt's World Cup scoring list. Abdelrahman Fawzi had scored twice in 1934. Salah had matched that total with 2 goals in 2018. His strike against New Zealand took him to 3. It was a personal record, but it was built on national history. Egypt's first World Cup goal scorer had held the mark for more than 9 decades. Their modern captain finally moved beyond it in the same match that delivered the country's first victory. That is not merely a statistic. That is a bridge. Fawzi represented Egypt's arrival. Salah represented Egypt's release. The match was not finished. Neither was Salah. In the 82nd minute, he delivered a low corner into the danger area. Mohamed Hassan, known throughout football as Trezeguet, attacked it and headed home Egypt's third. 3 goals in 1 World Cup match was another national first. Egypt had scored twice against Hungary in 1934, once against the Netherlands in 1990, and twice across their 3 matches in 2018. They had never scored 3 in a World Cup game until Vancouver. The third goal also transformed the emotional meaning of the night. A narrow lead creates anxiety. A 2-goal lead creates permission. Permission to believe. Permission to celebrate. Permission, finally, to stop counting the minutes since 1934. Salah had scored the winning goal and supplied the set piece for the final one. He was directly involved in the 2 moments that turned a comeback into history. But here's the part most fans miss. This was not simply another superstar rescue act. It was a redistribution of pressure. For years, Egypt's relationship with Salah had contained an impossible contradiction. His presence made victory more likely, but it also made every failure feel less acceptable. When you have one of the world's most famous forwards, patience disappears. Every tournament becomes a referendum. Every defeat becomes a debate about whether the national team is using him correctly. Against New Zealand, Salah did not have to perform every job. Zico scored the equalizer and created the winner. Hani supplied the cross. Trezeguet finished the contest. Schobert and the defenders survived New Zealand's direct threat. Salah was the decisive figure inside a collective comeback. That distinction matters. A star can win a moment. A functioning team can change a pattern. Egypt's pattern at the World Cup had always been competitive without completion. They had drawn with strong opponents. They had produced famous players. They had scored memorable goals. Yet they had never crossed the line between participation and victory. In Vancouver, the system finally supported the symbol. The result also broke a subtler barrier. Egypt won after conceding first. Their first World Cup victory did not come through an early lead protected by fear. It came through recovery. That gives the match a different kind of value. It proved this group could absorb a setback inside the tournament and still make clear decisions. In knockout football, that ability can matter more than looking comfortable for 90 minutes. Comfort is lovely. Tournaments rarely provide it. Now return to Hossam Hassan. To an outside viewer, a coach crying after a group stage victory might appear excessive. To Hassan, this was not one group stage victory. He is one of the great goal scorers in Egyptian football history. He represented his country for years and understood the scale of the national shirt long before he managed it. He knew how many Egyptian teams had tried to win at the World Cup. He knew how many coaches, players, and supporters had gone home carrying the same empty space. Then his team went behind. He had to walk into the dressing room, with the record closing around them again, and convince the players that history was not a prophecy. When the final whistle came, Hassan was not reacting only to what had happened in Vancouver. He was reacting to Naples, Palermo, Cairo, Volgograd, and every qualification campaign that had ended before the World Cup even began. He was reacting to the peculiar cruelty of representing a country that had dominated African football, but had never won on the sport's biggest stage. Egypt's continental record makes the World Cup drought even stranger. They have won the Africa Cup of Nations more times than any other country. Their domestic clubs have shaped African competition. Their football culture is enormous. Yet the World Cup had remained a locked door. That contrast created the pressure, continental power, global frustration. The tears came when those two realities finally stopped contradicting each other. There's also a reason Salah stood at the center of the release. His career has often been measured through records. Goals for Liverpool, individual awards, Premier League milestones, Champions League nights. But international football uses a different currency. Club football rewards excellence repeated across a season. Tournament football remembers a handful of images. A run, a finish, a flag, a coach crying beside the pitch. Salah already had the club numbers. What Egypt needed was a World Cup memory that belonged to victory. Now they have one. The goal against New Zealand did more than make Salah Egypt's leading World Cup scorer. It changed how his earlier goals would be remembered. The two strikes in Russia had come during 3 defeats. They showed its quality, but they could not alter Egypt's fate. The goal in Vancouver became part of a comeback, a win and a national first. Same competition, same player, completely different historical weight. This gives us a useful way to understand records in football. There are counting records, context records, and release records. Counting records tell you how many. Salah reached 3 World Cup goals for Egypt. Egypt scored 3 times in a World Cup match for the first time. Context records tell you what was unique. Egypt came from behind to earn their first victory. Salah produced a goal and a decisive set piece on the night the drought ended. Release records tell you what the achievement removed. 92 years without a win. 8 matches in the sequence before the breakthrough. Generations of being introduced at the World Cup through the language of waiting. The first category belongs in a database. The second belongs in analysis. The third belongs to people. That is why Hassan cried. And it is why the images after the whistle mattered almost as much as the goals. Egypt's players gathered in celebration. The relief was physical. The coach could no longer contain the emotion. Salah smiled among teammates who had just moved their country into a new historical category. World Cup winner. Not champion, not yet, but winner. One word had been missing from Egypt's World Cup identity since 1934. Vancouver finally supplied it. The danger now is to treat the breakthrough as the end of the story. It is not. The expanded World Cup rewards teams that can build momentum, but it also creates new routes and new traps. One victory can transform a group. It can also increase expectations overnight. Egypt must now manage the thing they spent 92 years chasing. Belief. Belief can free a team. It can also make them reckless. The next challenge is to preserve the emotional energy without turning every attack into a coronation. Tournament football is cruel to teams that celebrate the previous match for too long. For Salah, the victory changes the question. Before New Zealand, people asked whether he could lead Egypt to a World Cup win. Now they can ask how far he can lead them after it. That is a much more dangerous question for Egypt's opponents. For Hassan, the tears revealed the real scale of the job. International management is not only tactics, substitutions, and shape. It is memory management. A coach inherits every old disappointment, whether he wants it or not. His task is to make players respect history without becoming trapped inside it. At halftime, Egypt were trapped. By full time, they had broken out. The score was 3-1, but the true sequence was larger. Concession, response, control, release. That is the mental product from this night. Historic pressure does not disappear because a team ignores it. It disappears when the team converts it into action. Egypt conceded, adjusted, equalized, trusted its combinations, and allowed its best player to decide the match without asking him to become the entire team. That is why the victory felt different. It belonged to Salah, but not only to Salah. It belonged to Hassan, but not only to Hassan. It belonged to Fawzi, whose 2 goals in 1934 stood as Egypt's World Cup scoring mark for generations. It belonged to the 1990 team that came close without winning. It belonged to the 2018 team that discovered how unforgiving the tournament could be. Most of all, it belonged to supporters who had inherited a weight they did not begin. Football is strange like that. You can receive an old disappointment from people you never met. You can carry it for years. Then one left-footed finish in Vancouver changes the emotional inheritance of a country. So no, Mohamed Salah did not need to be the man crying for the story to be about what he released. His goal broke the scoring record. His contribution helped break the winless record. Egypt's 3 goals broke their single match scoring mark. The comeback broke the pattern of World Cup frustration. And Hossam Hassan's tears showed what no table could measure. 92 years had finally become 90 minutes. Tell me in the comments which mattered more to you. Salah becoming Egypt's leading World Cup scorer, or Egypt finally earning the victory generations had waited to see. Most fans think Mohamed Salah made history when the ball reached the net. Now we know the truth. The ball reached the net, and 92 years of history finally let go.